Awesome. So I guess we can just dive in anywhere. This is for both of our channels, and I can say a little bit about myself. You can say a little about yourself. I'm Dr. Melissa Sell. I am a chiropractor, and I've been studying and using the 5 biological laws of Germanic New Medicine for the last 4 years, and it has just completely transformed the way that I understand my health and my body, the way I help clients and friends and family, and it's just the most incredible work ever. And I'm here with Emilia today of the School of Meta Mothering. So I want to hear more about you and how you got into GNM and what you're up to.
Thank you. So I'm Emilia Stewart-Short, and I am the founder of School of Meta Mothering, which is all about mothering from a higher perspective, from preconception to parenting, going through all the stages and really integrating them as all equally important parts of the whole. And so a lot of it is about sovereignty and really learning what your truth is in your body and the way that your emotional responses impact your parenting journey. And, that to me is so in line with German New Medicine, which I discovered only a year ago, thanks to this whole, pandemic lockdown, worldwide situation. And I think it was actually a friend, Yolanda Norris Clark, who shared about how viruses aren't real. And I saw that and I just thought, well, what? I'm intrigued, but I don't know what that means. And she had just posted a video of a man saying that on our private membership network. And I then looked as far as I could to find out what does that actually mean. And I got led to German New Medicine, and my mind was completely blown and broken open in the best way possible. All of my whole 30 years of what I'd believed in what health was and what germs were and what everything was completely dismantled and deconstructed. And I have never been healthier and freer and better, really, since I discovered GNM. So yeah, I'm very, very grateful. I started working with an amazing consultant here in the UK, working through issues that I was having come up. So I really got the direct experience of Germany medicine working through chronic headaches, migraines that I was experiencing, and I dismantled them and actually have stopped them. And now, I know what the track or the trigger is, and I can usually just press the off switch, which is pretty amazing, unless my body needs to go through the healing phase, but it's never as bad. Like I never have to take anything for it anymore. So yeah.
That is incredible. And it really does. It just blows your mind open. It changes everything. There's such layers of nuance to GNM and understanding how the body works and why it does what it does. And when you bring all of that knowledge and wisdom into the work of parenting and mothering and raising children, I had an amazing conversation. It was about 2 years ago with an awesome woman from Romania, and she wrote this ebook, and it's a small ebook, but it is about how, the title of the book is How I Cure My Kids. How she uses the work of Dr. Hammer to understand her children, and her children like speak the language of GNM. Like when they have a tummy ache, when they have a rash, when they have something going on, they go, oh mommy, it must have been, they didn't share the toy at kindergarten, and so I was upset about that. And so how we can raise children in this world where they do not fear germs and bugs. I mean, I think it's the most heartbreaking, terrible, terrifying thing that's being done to children with masks and fear and hand sanitizer and this idea of unmasked people being unsafe and them living in this world of absolute fear. I mean, it was bad before. It was bad before teaching kids about germs and all of that, but it's worse than ever because children they're like in this state of fear of other humans, fear of germs and bugs, and to have a generation of children who know. And that's how we phase out the old. Like that, we have to build the new, and it's so hard to unbrainwash people. And so that's why your work and the work of teaching people who are yet to conceive, who want to have children, who are kind of starting out on that journey with this foundational knowledge, so that you can bring children into the world with this paradigm, so that they don't have to unlearn the fear of viruses and bacteria, that they know that bacteria are their friends and that they serve and help the healing process. And so, yeah, I'd love to, I mean, just dive into any area that you're interested in chatting about, because this work is just, it's so cool and it's so awesome. And anyone seeing this video who is going to start a family, please learn this first. Please learn and understand how your body functions, so that you do not live and parent from a place of fear, because your body never attacks you. Your body is never turning against you. Your body is always serving you in response to your perception of your world. And the more that grounded and peaceful of an individual you can become, I mean, you're going to have the healthiest, most brilliant, radiant children on this planet.
Absolutely. And yeah, I love that. And learning that my body, when I'm experiencing symptoms, is usually in a healing phase. That's what the symptoms are an expression of, was so beautiful, actually. And for my example with headaches, so before I would really dread one coming, and then I would go into that state of, creating an issue, basically, because I could feel one coming on and then it would make things worse, the fear of it. And now when I get that like tingle that I know that a headache could come, I think, okay, what was it that I felt loss of control or a sense of danger about that was resolved? And then I go into that. And if it continues, I'm like, okay, well, I'm really grateful that my body is able to detox and heal from that emotional response that I had. So yes, and it's interesting because I've got two children. I have a 3-year-old and an almost 1-year-old, two boys. And my 3-year-old was at playgroup today, and he came home with like red cheeks, like a slight rash on his cheeks. And so I instantly thought, okay, well, it was a long day for him. He was away from me all day today, which he never usually is. And I came home and I kissed him on the cheeks, and that's the resolution of the separation conflict of not being together. And it, was a red rash in that exact area. So for me, okay, I would love to talk to you about how can a mother or a parent, a father, implement this in their lives. So let's maybe start with germs. For those who don't know, germs, colds, flus. This was probably the biggest hurdle for me to understand, and it took, a lot of research on my part into German New Medicine and the 5 biological laws. How is it that you can't catch a cold? I can't give you a cold and you can't give me a cold. Our germs cannot transfer to each other.
So what Dr. Hammer discovered is that all symptoms occur after a biological conflict shock. And so you have to have a shock in order to develop an adaptation that then manifests in symptoms. So within a family unit, and this is super like a really interesting point of discussion. And I had this conversation with that woman I talked to, because she talks about within her, she's got a study group in Romania, and they talk about how children under the age of 7, and just knowing, the brain state of a child under the age of 7, they're kind of in a hypnotic state almost, and how they can take on the energies and emotions, and how, so a lot of people, they have a hard time grasping the you can't catch a cold thing, because they have personal experience of, somebody got sick, mom's out at the office, and so at the office got sick, and then she comes home and she's sick, and then all the kids and everybody in the whole family, and they're like, but how could that be if I didn't catch the illness, if there wasn't a bug? And so that, the idea of germ theory, it's very materialistic. It comes from this idea that the only thing that's real is physical material, and we don't take into account the emotional state, the conflict state, what's going on with the individual. And so when you have, let's say, a cold comes from a stink conflict. And so this is a conflict where you are in a moment feeling fed up with something, annoyed with something, suspicious of something, like something stinks. This stinks. I'm annoyed. I'm frustrated. And so, how easy is it to understand that when one person in the family is feeling annoyed and frustrated, that energy, that conflict state, very easily can be picked up by other family members. And so each person, and there's always stories of one person in the family that doesn't get the cold. So what's going on there? They're eating the same food, they're breathing the same air, they're in the same house, but not everyone is as receptive to other people's conflicts and what's going on with them. And so that's how, when you have to go deeper. You have to kind of look beyond what we typically look at. And so you have to open your mind and you have to be willing to see, okay, what else could have been going on? So many people are detached from their emotions, or they're taught to suppress. So they're not even aware a lot of times when they're conflicted. And so those types of people tend to really poo-poo GNM, or they hear about it and they're like, no, this was, I'm not conflicted. I don't have a problem. I'm not emotionally upset. I just caught a germ, and that's why and it's, if you have a hard time receiving this information and thinking about it, there may be some block within you where you're not allowed to even acknowledge the emotions that you're experiencing. So yes, you can't catch a conflict. You can't catch a cold. You can pick up on the energy of a conflict and have your own conflict in reaction to something someone else is dealing with. So if you have the idea in your mind that Sally is sneezing and she seems to have a head cold and I'm going to catch it, and that stinks because I don't want to have a head cold. I don't want to get sick. That could be the stink conflict that you're catching, but you're not catching it. You're not getting, because the bacteria and the virus, they are byproducts. They are there as a result of a healing phase. So when the body goes through the tissue repair phase, viruses, exosomes, protein particles basically are present at the site, but those particles can't be transferred to someone and make them ill. Even in studies that they've done trying to prove contagion, there's never been solid proof of contagion, which a lot of people are shocked to hear. That you'd think that, given the fact that this is such dogma in our society, you'd think that there is hardcore proof that every single time we can take, snot and sputum and all of this gunk from someone who's sick and pass it on to someone else and they would get the symptoms. That doesn't happen consistently. So it's very, and in the literature, it even, they've done studies on this and they cannot prove that there is a bug that jumps from person to person and makes everybody down the line sick. And so it
Which
has
is
to do
crazy
with
in
the individual.
today's, yeah, crazy in today's time of what we're living through, and how, I walk too close to someone and they run away from me. It's like we've all got cooties, these imaginary fictional cooties, and it's really harmful actually. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it is.
I wanted to add to the cold thing. So my direct experience as well with colds was either a stink conflict, so either the metaphorical stink conflict, or the literal stink conflict. You maybe walk past and smell someone smoking a cigarette and you don't like that smell, or a perfume you don't like, and that can also create the buildup from your nose to then release and get a cold. Once you're out of the situation and it's resolved. And also, what was a big one for me was colds with separation conflicts. So, children maybe go back to school and they haven't smelt their school and been around everyone for a long time. And when they're reunited, their separation conflict has been resolved and they get a cold. Or it's the other way around, they come home from a day at school being away from their mother and father, and then the resolution is met and they get a cold. And so this can happen on a large scale when everyone is being separated at school and going back to their parents, depending on how we respond to the case of separation, I guess.
Absolutely. And it's so primal. And that you really have to tap into that, the primal nature of separation and scent, and how, like we smell things, but we don't think of ourselves as primarily like we're smelling. Like I miss the smell of my mother or my partner. But think about these children, like you have to think about this organismic history and our biology. And when you can see your child in that way, and you can understand how them being separated from you and not being able to smell you is such a deeply felt sensation, and then they smell you again, oh, there's that sinus cold or that sneezing or the sniffles. And so to get out of the idea that when the child experiences the symptom, they're not sick at that moment. So getting away from that language, and how do you, oh, you're sick, oh, you don't feel good, you know changing the dialogue, changing the way that you speak to your children about their symptoms, I think is such a powerful way to break out of the germ theory model, to break out of the sickness as breakdown, because symptoms are not breakdown. That's one of like the biggest thing within GNM, is that it's not a breakdown of function. It is the expression of normal function. There's adaptation during the conflict phase. If you're brand new to GNM, the law of two phases, when the child is experiencing the conflict, when you're experiencing the conflict of stink, of frustration, of separation, of I can't smell the thing I want to smell, there's erosion or widening of the mucosal cavity of the sinuses. And so that's an adaptation, so that you can bring in more, you can smell better, so that you can bring in more to detect the scent. And then when you recover, when you resolve the conflict, that is tissue restoration. So the runny nose, the stuffy nose, the swelling, when you don't feel good, that is an indication that your body is restoring and repairing. So being able to bring that and tell your child, oh, you're repairing, oh, this is good, you resolved a conflict, that changes the way that child is going to view symptoms for the rest of their life. If they see it as, oh, I'm sick, there's something wrong with me, I need medicine. I mean, it's very subtle, but we teach children to reach for drugs. We teach children, oh, this is a bad thing, oh, you need a shot, oh, you need this pill. And then we get surprised when in their teen and adult years they get hooked on some type of pharmaceutical drug or street drug, whatever. It's like we indoctrinated them with this idea that you're broken, there's something wrong with you, and you need a potion from the outside in order to fix you.
Totally. Yeah, that's a really powerful lesson from the beginning, for sure. And I think it even goes both ways with natural medicine and like herbal remedies and homeopathy. And it's again, like you said, it's the same narrative with you need something external to yourself in order to be okay. And yeah, so powerful to learn this and to teach children from birth this amazing model. I mean, my son was 2 years old when I started teaching him, but I'd never really pathologized when he was sick before. I'd never given him anything other than homeopathy. We'd been through some pretty gnarly fevers. He went up to 106.7 once, and I didn't give him anything. I just kind of supported him through it. And then since I learned, and he was fine, but I just want to bring it up because I think a fever that high also isn't very normal. And from what I've learned about water conflicts is that if you do have a water conflict, they can cause complications in your healing process, in your symptoms maybe. And so I do believe that that is what spiked his fever so high. And I just think this is such important wisdom for as many parents as possible to have. What we need to understand why something is happening and have the power in ourselves, in our innate knowing as parents, that our child can heal this. Okay, what conflict has gone on in our child's life that we need to process with them and support them through? When I was 2 years old, I fell off a bridge in the middle of the night in pitch black with my mum. We'd just arrived in France and we were crossing this like footbridge that was over a big, big rushing river. And she had her suitcases, it was pitch black, and I fell through the bars and she just had a splash, couldn't see anything. And she dived in unknowingly. into the water, and they found me with a torch when the guard came, swirling in an eddy on my back with my boots and puffer jacket and everything on, completely in shock. And she was in shock too. And so maybe we could talk a bit about water conflicts. And I will then say that I definitely had a water conflict from that point and carried that through my whole life, where I would retain fluid whenever I went into a state of survival, or there are other reasons why. And one example is when I was pregnant with my first son, I traveled to Western Africa to do an initiation for him, for his unborn soul. And it was a very, very challenging but powerful experience. But I was in survival mode because I was pregnant and I was alone, and I was having to make sure I had enough food to eat. And, I was completely out of my comfort zone on many levels. And I left there and I gained so much weight. I mean, I blew up. And I went from 64 kilos at the beginning of my pregnancy to 100 kilos, which I don't know how many pounds that is, but that's a lot. And so I do believe that that was from my unresolved water conflict, which hopefully you will teach a bit about now. And I have since resolved my water conflict, by doing a lot of work on that initial instance, and going back and really making the connection. And yeah, so in my second pregnancy, I didn't gain weight like that.
That's so interesting. Wow. And so there are kind of a couple different water conflicts. And I think the one you're referring to is the water retention conflict. Is that what you're getting at, with the water conflict, or the kidney? Because there's one with the kidney parenchyma, and there's also the kidney collecting tubules.
I think I'm referring to the kidney collecting tubule.
Okay, yeah. So the kidney collecting tubule, that is the one where you hold on to water and you gain weight. And so if the experience of that terrifying 2-year-old off the bridge in the dark was an existence conflict of, am I going to die right now? Because there's another conflict where you're having a conflict having to do with water itself, like water or fluid. And in that situation, the body actually will build additional kidney. You go through this kidney cyst process. So that's a separate conflict. But this one, the water retention, so this is existence, isolation, abandonment, or refugee. And so when you're experiencing that kind of fish out of water sort of fear, it's like a very terrifying experience biologically. And the body goes through this ancient process of holding on to water. This is controlled from the brainstem, so the oldest portion of the brain. It is an endodermal type of tissue, so it's our oldest, most ancient type of tissue. And what happens is the kidney collecting tubules, they proliferate. And so we close off this exit, because if you kind of ancient biologically were a fish washed up onto the shore, holding on to water is your only chance of survival. And so our body still has this ancient programming within it. So when we experience something so fearful for our existence, the body starts to hold on to water. So this experience that you had, pregnant, not sure about, getting enough food and safety and all of that, makes perfect sense that your body is fearing for its existence. And it's like, all right, we need to hold on to this water. And because fat cells are very good storage cells for water, we hold on to it in weight. And so if there is excessive weight gain without a nutritional, change, that very likely is a water retention type of conflict, this fear for your existence, or feeling isolated, abandoned, disconnected in some way. And to resolve that, you need to restore the sense of safety, because ultimately, the biological programs are about safety and survival. Our body wants to survive. And so when you're feeling unsafe in some way, the body will begin this adaptation process where whichever way your body perceives the shocking situation, that determines which conflicts get activated.
Right. And with the kidney collecting tubule syndrome, or we'll just call it water conflict, but referring to that one, it's true, right, that it can cause a lot of complications then, because your body is not able to just function in its normal state of healing when things come up. And so what I'm interested in is applying this to pregnancy. So why a lot of women towards the end of pregnancy start to have complications and swelling and such. Is that connected to the water conflict? And I really, for my School of Matter Mothering, I'm looking into ways to pre-pregnancy resolve these conflicts and build an awareness around them, so that these issues don't kind of get created and escalate unknowingly.
Oh, yes. And there's so many that I've noticed in women during pregnancy, certain conflict themes that tend to come up. So, this, are you feeling fearful about giving birth? Are you feeling isolated because you're not going out as much? Or, what are the fears about, your nest? Is your nest prepared? Are you feeling like, oh, I'm not ready, my partner's not ready? What fears have entered your consciousness when you start putting on more weight, or when your blood pressure is going up? Again, that could be you're holding on to this water, and that could be another complication. Identity conflicts, I find, are very frequent within pregnancy, because you're becoming this you're birthing yourself as a mother. You're becoming this new person. It's like, well, who am I going to be then? What's my place? Am I going to go back to work? What's my role? Am I going to am I going to be good at being a mother? So identity conflicts, I find, and that has to do with things like hemorrhoids, morning sickness, like stomach problems, gallbladder type of issues. So there's so many little nuances of what is going on in your mind, preconception, being pregnant, thinking about having your baby. There are a lot of potential for conflicts. And so being aware in advance and working through, this is how I want this to go. Having confidence rather than wondering and questioning, oh gosh, am I going to be good at this? Deciding, like getting that sense of confidence, choose how you want it to be, rather than waiting around and kind of worrying and wondering and, oh, is this, like asking all of these unanswerable questions in some ways. I think that by deciding this is how it's going to be, and if unexpected things happen, I'm going to roll with that, and I'm going to be adaptable. And so it's kind of learning how to be this adaptable person, where things don't have to be a certain way, where you're willing to roll with the punches, and whatever arises, you just have that confidence. I'll resolve that too, and I can handle that, and I can handle that. And giving yourself that ability to just know that you're ready for whatever happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And in my experience, you can't fake that place though. And that is where the work needs to happen, to kind of elevate yourself and your consciousness to be able to effortlessly roll with the punches, and heal past trauma and all the things that get in the way, the blocks to being you, I guess.
Yeah, healing that past trauma is very important for women that have experienced hyperemesis gravidarum, and the terrible, horrible sickness all throughout the pregnancy. That just in the a few women I've worked with that have experienced that, it seems to be rooted in this kind of fear of being a mother, or issues with their own mother, that they didn't have a great relationship. And so becoming a mother is kind of this fearful process for them. Am I going to be good at this? What is this relationship going to be like? Kind of a big identity conflict that persists the entire pregnancy. And so if you can heal that, if you can look at these, mother wounds and your own relationship issues, and doing that work, like you said, it is work, and you can't fake it, because that's the thing, your body knows the truth. And so even if there's a part of you that's like, I got this, if you're experiencing the symptoms, that just indicates that there's a deeper level at which the conflict is still active. And so that's where you can always default to the body. That's where, the GNM and the body doesn't lie. It tells the truth about the primal experience that's being had. And sometimes you have to dig through layers to figure out, what is that primal experience? Am I even allowed to know my own emotions? So many people, they've been taught and conditioned to not acknowledge or know what's going on inside of them. And so, in my work coaching people, for all sorts of different life and health issues. Self-awareness is like the number one thing. You've got to figure out, you've got to learn yourself. You've got to have this deep self-knowledge of, I know where my emotions come from. I used to, before I did this work, my emotions were so random. It's like, oh, I just feel anxious today. Oh, I just feel depressed or worried or scared or angry. And I didn't know where those emotions came from. It was just like, that's just how I feel. And so that looking inside and looking at the stories and looking at the traumas and looking at the things that you've been through in your life and starting to see, oh, no wonder I see the world that way. But from this new place of consciousness, I realized that that's not serving me. That's not going to create the results that I want. That's not what I want to pass down to my children. So I've got to rewire. I've got to reprogram. I've got to rework this, and having the confidence that everything is fixable. You can work with any personal history. There's nothing that has happened to you or that you've done or trauma that you've had that can't be reimagined, revised, reworked into an amazing present and future.
Totally. It is really, it excites me so much. And I'll just share, when I first learned about GNM, it was at the beginning of when the first lockdown had happened here in London. And prior to that, I had a newborn baby, and I was afraid because this fear was just being poured at me from every angle. And I don't watch the mainstream news, I never have, but still I was, aware of what was happening, and could my baby get sick, and could this happen and whatnot. And then I learned GNM, and I went to the supermarket, and I was just singing to myself. I just felt so free knowing that no one external can do anything to me in terms of my own health, and it's completely in my hands. And I have an experience where my mother's housekeeper, she got the symptoms of the Rona, and she started having the symptoms, and she was with my son and my baby at the time. We were all at the house, and she said, "Oh, Emilia, I'm really worried. I've lost my sense of taste and smell, and I don't feel so well." And I was like, "Oh, don't worry. Seriously, you can't give it to us. It's okay. Like, just go look after yourself. We can't get sick from you. That's not how it works." And she kind of looked at me like I was crazy. She was like, "Okay." And went home, and we were all fine, and no one else got it. And she had been around everyone, and she had gone through a few days prior a situation where she found out that her flatmate could no longer afford to live with her, and she was questioning whether she would have a home, and she was very much in fear about everything that was happening. She's from the Philippines originally. Her whole family's there. They are supported by her financially. So there was just all this stuff in the air. And I said to her when she was sick, Vivian, what happened, within the last 38 hours that you got the symptoms? And she was like, "Oh, nothing." And then it came out that all of this stuff had happened, but it took some digging to remember this really big life event that had just happened. So it's just interesting how easy it is to plow over, really significant things that happen in our lives and not make those connections. And just how powerful it is. And she's now not afraid of getting sick because she experienced it.
Oh, that is an incredible story. And oh my goodness, that is a big life event. That is a territorial fear, probably a stink conflict, so many things wrapped up in this: losing taste, losing smell, cough, whatever these symptoms are. And that's why, you have to look at the individual always. Even if there's a ton of people, well, it's so many people, every single one of those people is having a unique and complex personal experience of life. And so we cannot overlook that personal experience. You cannot just say, statistically, this many people and this and all these people are, it's like, well, tell me about one individual. Tell me about what was going on in their life. I know some people who they tested positive and had symptoms, but they had a death in the family, and were having a ton of people over their house, and tons of people like in their what is typically their sanctuary, their space, and a lot of people were coming over. It's like territorial fear that makes perfect sense, of just like bodies and people in the house, in and out, when normally this is just your sacred space. And then once that all dies down, whoop, there are the symptoms. That, it's totally understandable. And, this whole testing positive, simply if it's a tissue within the body, when your body is repairing tissue, there's byproducts. And so, the things that we're testing for, it is not a nefarious agent. And if you're watching this, please go down this rabbit hole, because the idea that there is a submicroscopic nefarious agent that is going from person to person, it is the biggest myth, misunderstanding, potentially nefarious plot by someone to scare you into submission, potentially. Like, look at this,
Well,
because
and fraud from Louis Pasteur himself, and it was self-admitted on his deathbed that he had committed fraud with his germ theory. And of course, then that all got glossed over and hush-hushed because of the profit and everything available from pharmaceuticals and germ theory. So yeah, but it's a subject that, I don't know if you experienced this, but within my societal kind of circle, like my family and my mother understands GNM, so I'm grateful for that. But within everyone else, the majority don't. And anyone who questions the mainstream narrative is labeled a conspiracy theorist. And yeah, so it does make it hard to speak one's truth. However, it's more important than ever to non-dogmatically share our perspectives and our direct experience dealing with, with illness and with germs and all the things that doesn't actually make us sick.
Absolutely. Yeah. Direct experience is everything. I was thinking back to, it was a long time ago. It was like 2009. I was going to school in Georgia, and my boyfriend, we were long distance, and he was in Michigan. And we hadn't seen each other for months, and he was coming to town to visit, and he was going to be there for like a week or two. And I was so excited. But when he came, and we had all these plans to go to all these restaurants and, just go out and have fun. And when he came, I had a stuffed nose, and I couldn't taste or smell for 2 weeks. And I was like, what is going on? And when I look back at that, it's like, oh my gosh, I had such an because the intensity and duration of the conflict, that determines the intensity and duration of the symptoms that you experience, the restoration symptoms. It was such an intense conflict. I could not smell or taste for 2 whole weeks. And I was baffled, because at that time I was in chiropractic school, and I was doing all of the healthy things, eating healthy and exercising, my like whole lifestyle. Nothing had changed. And I'm like, and I didn't have allergies. And so I just was like, did I just develop an allergy suddenly? Because I didn't know GNM at the time. But in retrospect, it's like, oh, this makes perfect sense that I would have a stuffed nose and couldn't taste or smell for 2 weeks. Because I had an intense stink conflict of this separation, could have even been the primal of like smelling and being near him. And then here he arrives, and I resolve the conflict. And so looking back at that, it's like, oh my goodness, every single time I've ever developed symptoms, if you go in and you look at the story, what happened prior to the development of the symptoms, there's always going to be something that went on in your experience. And even if it seems subtle, even if you're like, no, there's no way that your body responds to very subtle experiential shifts. And so when you can see how just, like, think about your nervous system, think about like the ancient parts of your body, like at all times, all it wants to know is, do we need to adapt? Because you're built for survival, and these programs are ancient. And so little tiny things, little tiny realizations, or, oh, that could be dangerous, or, oh, that could be a problem, that you don't think are a big deal, are big messages to your nervous system. So the symptoms, there's always something underlying them. And if you can get curious and interested in the process, instead of just, saying, just so many people are so quick to dismiss it rather than investigate. Get curious about this body that you have. Get curious about this psyche and this brain and these organs, and learn about them, because that's the thing, is I can't give that to someone getting interested in your body, but this is your vessel that you are going throughout this world, and your children. And if we don't understand our bodies, this I think is a big thing. If we don't understand for ourselves, have an understanding of how the system works, you're always going to be having to go to someone else, outsource to someone else when something goes on. When you have a symptom, if you don't understand it, then you can go to anyone, and you are subject to their training, their beliefs, their dogma, their treatments, and you are in their hands. And so and then if you look at the system at large, whose hands are you putting yourself in? Like, what do they believe is true about the body? They believe that this body is like a car, that you can take pieces out and take parts out, and it does things randomly, and we don't know why it happens. It doesn't have regard. The whole system doesn't have regard for the brilliance of the human body. And so that's where I think that every person, every parent especially, has to be their own doctor. Like, you are smart enough to understand your body. And when you have a symptom, you are smart enough to understand why it happened and to make those connections. And so believing that, and going down this path of, you don't have to study forever, just little nuggets at a time. Oh, here's this symptom. Let me find out, what's the GNM perspective about that? What happened in my life? Do this with every symptom. Every time you experience something, from a toothache, a cold sore, a sty in your eye, a rash, like every little thing is an opportunity for you to learn about your body and how it works.
It is. It's so cool. I mean, I'll give just a personal example, because I feel like I have found those the most helpful when learning about GNM. So I was absolutely fine, and we just found out yesterday afternoon that we had the purchase of our new house had just been approved, and we've exchanged, and we move in less than 2 weeks. And this has been a long conflict, because we've been kind of homeless, moving around into different Airbnbs, and we had a house fall through that we were 3 days away from exchanging on, and it was a big conflict of not having a nest, and all these, just many things. And I'm a real nester. I have to feel rooted. It's a big thing for me. Anyway, as soon as we exchanged, I got a sore throat, literally like that. And it was on the left side, and the right side is something that you can't swallow, that is resolved, and the left side is something that you can't spit out, that's resolved. And this whole situation has just been something that it's been pretty traumatic actually over the past 6 months. And I finally spat it out, that this thing that I just couldn't spit out, and I couldn't like fully be in my life. And I was like, oh, couldn't spit it out. And I swear, like magic, my sore throat went away. And it's no exaggeration. It was very sore. 1 second later, completely gone.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. That is incredible.
It's really cool. And so before I learned about German New Medicine, I was really interested in the metaphysical causes of disease. So coming from a spiritual perspective, and now, and trust me, I'm very much into spirituality and consciousness, and I do a lot of work on myself down those avenues. But now I don't even look to the metaphysical causes, because they're not actually in alignment with German New Medicine, from what I've learned and studied. And so now when something comes up, it's not, to me, the physiological response of what's happening is spiritual. It's all connected. And it's so beautiful when we know the precise reason why something happens. And it gives ultimate freedom in my books.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, so like if your child has an ear infection, like understanding what the ear infection is, like the right ear is wanting to hear something. The left ear is wanting to not hear something, to block something out. And so understanding what the child is going through. They heard, you can't do this. They didn't want to hear it. You're not allowed, or you can't have this. And the child had an experience of that. And so the ear infection, it is not bacteria getting in the ear infecting it. It
Yeah.
is a tissue adaptation to a deeply felt experience that little child had. And the symptoms are the restoration of the body returning to homeostasis. And so supporting the child, and this is something, I'll share the link in the description for the video, to the video and the little book that my friend from Romania wrote. She does this thing where she talks to her children in their sleep. When the conscious mind is asleep, the way that she describes it is the soul is free. And the soul is free, so like the subconscious mind, like talking to your children when they're sleeping. And if you can identify the conflict that they experienced, or something that you were going through, and they picked up on your fear, talk to them, have a vulnerable moment with your child and say, oh, I'm so sorry that I yelled at you, or that you felt that you couldn't have this thing. Everything is okay. You are safe, you are loved. And that, if a child does have a fever, do this. Speak truth and confidence and peace over them while they're sleeping, and you will be amazed when they wake up. They'll be very likely, the symptoms will be greatly diminished or completely gone when you make this understanding. And so many mothers, and this is something that that, like, worry. A lot of people feel like mothering and worry are one and the same thing, that you have to worry about your child. But when you realize that worry is often like, it's a prayer for what you don't want. You're making pictures of fear, of what you don't want, of worst case scenarios. And part of that feels responsible because, oh, I'm the mother, I have to think about all the possible things that could go wrong. And it feels like a right thing to be doing. But when you realize the energy of worry and the energy of fear, it's focusing on what you don't want. I mean, I know some of my biggest traumas were like worries my mother was going through, and worries that I had on, because of what she was worried about. I didn't feel safe and okay. I was so scared about certain things because she was worried. And she probably just, thought that she was being responsible and thinking through all of the things that could go wrong. But when you realize how that energy is transferred to your child, and how they're picking up, these little kids that are in this hypnotic state of like, oh, money is scary. If you don't have money, you could die. And so that was something that I picked up very early on because of fears and worries that my mother had. And so by you understanding, I need to convey confidence. So I have to work on me first. I have to find confidence and strength and focus on my ideal outcome, and then transfer that to my child, because that peace, that groundedness, that safety and confidence, that's what the nervous system needs in order to persist through the healing phase, and to complete it without reactivating a new conflict. Because that's how, so many people, we just like live in these conflict loops. If you have chronic pain or chronic rashes or whatever you or your child's dealing with, there's a loop, and you have to break it with a new response. And you're capable of doing that, but you have to persist in that effort, because the default mode of our minds is so powerful. It's so easy to go back to our old ways of doing things.
Absolutely. And talking about the nervous system, I mean, when babies are born, they share their mother's nervous system for, quite some time in the infant stage, and coming into, as they start to break away into their own energetic body and nervous system. And it's that mama baby, mama Toto, one needing to be together. And then it just goes to how damaging it is to separate mother and baby for any length of time. Even, if a baby's born in hospital, for instance, and the baby's taken away to be washed or weighed, that is a conflict. And it's straight away when they're born, a separation conflict, or an existence conflict, or survival conflict, or whatever. And so having this wisdom beforehand just adds another layer of why to honor nature's blueprint of keeping mother and baby together. And I found for myself that, River, my second son, and I, we shared our nervous system. And after he was born, it was when he was born 2 weeks before lockdown happened. And, you know, prior to me knowing German New Medicine and what's happening in the world's kind of falling apart feeling coming from the outside, we were just in our little nest, and he was free birthed, no one there. So it was a very kind of powerful, he never left my side. However, we shared a nervous system. And as I started to kind of uncover some of the darker truths that were floating around on the internet about what was happening and why, I went into a state of fear and shock for different reasons than, you know, the mainstream was saying. But I noticed that he started to get ill as I was getting afraid. And it was it wasn't because of my shock, because he had to have his own independent shock to experience that, but maybe his feeling of, you know, me pulling away and being in a different place than I was in our little bubble could have caused a shock for him. And as soon as I realized that and started to put all of those things that I'd been looking at away and really focus on my baby and focus on healing him through my words and my love and my touch and my presence, again, went away instantly. His stomach ache went away, his little cold went away. And that was my first experience with German New Medicine, of realizing how powerful it was.
That is incredible. That is so amazing. And yeah, so the child is having their own unique experience, and you know, you are their access to the outside world is like, mommy, how safe is it out there? You know, is it safe in this world? Do I need to adapt? Am I okay? And so just being aware of just this communication that's taking place from you to that child, and then them having their own experience in the world, and for you to go through that transition of fear of, you know, stuff going on in the world, stuff outside of me. And that's where I think the spiritual component, you know, is huge, of, you know, getting away from that idea that there are outside things that can hurt me, that there are forces of evil coming up against me, because that whole ideology is one of battle, is one of, we need to protect ourselves. And so what is the nervous system here? Protect ourselves. And that means adaptation that eventually manifests as healing symptoms and tissue restoration. And so the more you can stay grounded in your truth and in your confidence, and that no outside being or entity or system can harm me, and you stand so sovereign in that truth, that is, I mean, that's the ultimate thing for healing. And but if you do have that underlying fear of external enemies, of outside forces that can harm you, you're kind of at the mercy of what comes on the TV. What are people saying? Do I need to be afraid? And that's where, like, the confidence is everything. And you do have to get to that. What do you believe is true about the world? What is your, you know, what do you believe this life even is? And so that's why I do find my work so, and that's why I love everything about your school, is that, you know, it's all of the things. It's the biology, but it's also the psychology, and it's also the spirit, and bringing it all together and educating people through that process, I think, is incredible. We need this type of work. I mean, it's, no one is taught how their body works, how their mind works, you know, what is what's going on in the biggest picture of our experience. And people going through that journey, I think, is incredible. And I love what you're doing. And I love how you're, you know, just being there to help guide people through this process. So I just wish you all the best with your, you know, your school, and people, if you are in conception zone, if you're like wanting to have you want to go through that process, I think that, you know, the tools that you have and are providing through your school seem really amazing.
Thank you. And likewise, I just loved following you. I found you on Instagram as soon as I discovered German New Medicine, and you just have such a bold and wise voice, very, very deeply needed in the world. And I tried to connect my mother-in-law with you because my consultant was, he was kind of out of reach, and she had an earache problem in her left ear. So that would have been something that she didn't want to hear. But yeah, anyone who is interested in learning more about German New Medicine, please speak to a trained consultant, because there's so much room for kind of misunderstanding, especially at the beginning. That's how I have the understanding that I have now. It's very overwhelming just looking online. You really need to learn this material. So I highly recommend Dr. Melissa Sell for anyone looking to get freedom on their self-healing journey. And yeah, I just, from the last thing that you said, you know, what kind of world do we want to live in? How do we want to see the world we're living in? And for me, it's the world is a safe place for me and my family. And that's just my mantra. No matter what, it's a safe place because I choose it to be. And that has been really transformational.
That is beautiful. Yep. And that is the world that we want children to come into. One of safety, no external enemies, no bugs and germs, no, you don't have to protect yourself or, have a potion injected into you in order to be okay and safe in this world. Like, your body is infinitely wise and you're connected to infinite intelligence. And this is a safe and wonderful place to be. So yes, we are creating that world one new person at a time. It's one individual. This is something that, like, whoever's watching this video, it's like, this is your opportunity to learn about your body and to learn how to be safe and to navigate this amazing world that we're in without fear. And so thank you so much for having this conversation with me, Emilia. I'm so excited. I'm sure that we'll do things again in the future. But yeah, I guess we'll wrap it here.
Great. So great talking.